so I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coffee came in late, so.
No, no.
It's okay. You're over or.
I'm reingeschlafen ein bisschen, ne?
Here's another one.
Yeah, I'm not moving it.
Okay, good.
I'm not taking it away. I'm just cleaning up a little. What can I say to you? You have to take over. Next week I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be in Kazakhstan. So that's what I'm doing. Next week I'm not here. In Kazakhstan. That was Father's Joseph. So somebody has to make up the coffee. And
You have to have us all in mind, you know, you have to,
yeah.
you have to take care of all of us.
I'm going to take care of you. You
You're,
understand?
you're representing us.
Can you sit here? Because I want to.
I don't care.
No, yesterday I was actually thinking I got the profile, I lost my oh. Give me one more thing. Where is this? Where is this?
Yeah, of course I saw NYU, there's such mums there.
Yeah, I know.
Because she's having the procedure, I think, on Thursday or something.
No, today.
Today. So we never heard about it. So 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we get a memo from them. We need a clearance, and if it's by not here in the next hour, we're canceling the surgery. The clearance night. We didn't give us a day notice. Give us a week notice. Every other place gives us 2 weeks notice, 4 weeks notice. We get at 2 o'clock. Somebody, if it's not here at 3:30, we're canceling a surgery. What kind of behavior?
Yeah, they're crazy.
So we sent it. I took
I
took care of it right away.
If I wasn't told this guy was like a very specialist in this field,
I took care of it right away.
My mother did not want to use him.
I took care of it right away.
No, sure, thank you.
I mean, it sounds like it's a big excision, a
yeah,
wide
yeah.
excision.
It's important to get rid of it. I was told by a couple of different people that. Well, they'll keep her overnight, they said. Normally they send her home.
It was pretty tough. They might send it over 5 minutes later.
Exactly.
She's tough as nails, that lady.
I tell you, boy.
Big running joke about it in the office. That she's like tough as nails. Everybody knows her already.
Over there they know what
She
you're
really,
doing.
she really have her out of my office. Oh, she really see what's coming in. Everybody know what she really see.
I was with her this time, but they kept her waiting like
They have
5
her voice
minutes.
down pat. There's 3 girls who can imitate your mother's voice.
Oh, wow. They kept her waiting 5 minutes by the X-ray of the heart. She like said, "Excuse me."
Look, Dr. Naka did the best thing of all. He told her that it's
Yeah.
the heart surgery. You should saw Dr. Naka.
Such a pain. Oh, very good.
Also, my wife was so excited when I told her I got some Karen Shabbos in shul. I just, she hadn't seen your wife in such a long time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
brought home regards. I said, Karen asked you, she wants how you are.
Very nice, thank you. We've been on that block 25 years.
I've been on that block only 22 years.
Yeah, we were the first one that moved in. Nobody believed they're ever going to be there.
I know, people told us we were crazy. We bought
Yeah,
that property. They said, this is Michigan.
There will never be a shul there, nothing.
Some Libby Shul said now we're getting hate mail.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
On down Grandview, a few houses down from him on Grandview too, and he had to a Spook Rock.
He's 3 at home. Not even.
A few houses from
Two
him.
homes.
And my mother-in-law who lived on Martha, she was nifted before Pesach. We sold her property, her house, to David Lichtenstein, who's made a shul there, so I'm getting hate mail that we sold her the house. From people who are courageous enough to sign that hate mail anonymously. Yeah, people live in it. They don't want to show on the block. I'll tell them it's a Chabad shul, that'll really scare them.
I tried to drop a bunch of it. When I had a video, then I got my money. The first 3 years.
What's 10 o'clock now? Does anybody believe him adopting his mom?
Listen, let's go with our rabbi. It's good for the rabbi, it's good for us.
You have a point.
You know what? was good for the Rebbe, it was good for the Rebbe's father, it was good for our Rabbi, and so far the nation of Dubai did a lot of good chesed. So if it's good for them 10 o'clock, that means the tefillahs are going up somehow,
That's it.
right? So
So we learn to see this 2-3 hours before that. It's alright.
and 100% guaranteed shalom bayis. The less you spend home with your wife on Shabbos, the less you fight, and the less you fall asleep on the table while you're pretending to do it. Right? It worked for me for 40 years. I'm married for 40 years. I come home at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. By the time I finish eating, I fall asleep at the table. Well, that's in the days almost goes ahead.
Listen, are you not planning to go to the festival?
I don't know. I don't know if it's my day. Because my day is crazy. I have to go to the cellar. I'm living tomorrow. No, I'm leaving tomorrow to Miami. I'll be back. I'll be back Friday morning.
Over there, it's that building, my Tante Sal's
Yes,
building.
yes,
You ever
yes.
see my aunt there still? You see my aunt?
I left.
You don't know what she looks like?
No, I left. I left after Pesach, so I don't know. I'm not there since after Pesach.
Speaking of Chol Reik, I'm going to have to nudge the rabbi. Understand?
I asked him if he's a choleric or not yet. Or he just wants to be.
Sorry, Luigi, I actually chazed this stuff. Don't tell my kids. So here where he says, no, I'm sorry, over here. One is to be Yasser Ashalosav, and the second one is to make himself, like you said, a yud. What's it again? The phrase again? A tachas hayesod.
Nekuda tachas hayesod.
That's okay. And then he says, so first. So that's the person who didn't do Chana number 1 in terms of making himself a clay rake. Now, but this second one, he does Hachana number 1, but I guess he means he's not doing Hachana number 2 yet.
Yeah, we're gonna do that now.
We didn't do that yet? Okay.
We're holding right there.
Okay. That's the Kli of our Chesed.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't get it. We didn't do it.
Yeah, we're holding mamash there. Afra Chesas.
Yeah, when I was little, he was a little pack. I used to give him every day. Now I give him a couple days a week.
What's going on?
Say Oznacha. Afra Chesas. Was sagst du?
Not here tomorrow?
Till Friday. And then
Not here the next 2 days, so you can.
I take your seat?
You take my seat next to
I'll give
Who's
him
gonna
a
ask
chance.
questions?
Representing
Give
us,
him a coffee. Coffee to do.
Kazakhstan.
Yes, to do.
Ah, yeah.
The class is next Wednesday. I just sent you a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Next
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
What's the
name?
name?
Yeah.
Have a call from Bergen. But then I was father's next Tuesday. Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Give him
Renee.
a No, I'm giving him a chance.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהקהל בדברו.
You're going now?
Let's
Go to Miami. I'll be back for Shabbos. And then Sunday I'm leaving. So you gotta take care of the coffee. Looks like a watch.
You have to leave me enough packages.
Yeah. The little piece they got.
As if we got on top, believe me. You can't, as we know, nobody sees what's on top.
Everybody goes to the cup.
נשמע שמו.
They take cups. Be good for 10 days. So you make l'chaim, so I can see it.
We need you, not your coffee.
No, but I want to see it from the other side so I can show my camera in Kazakhstan the way you guys
But brain.
brag, yeah.
Hazelnut.
We'll make a connection with it. And he's also going to do it. So you'll have a whole update. Yeah.
Michelle's not going with you.
No, he's
Oh,
not.
really? Yeah.
Whoa. Hello.
Oh, wow.
No, the air conditioning's still on.
No.
Okay.
Somebody does this video.
Ellen.
4 days.
Tonight
I was flying.
And then I told her.
Ay, 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 ay.
13 hours ahead.
Ay, ay,
When do we come back? Thursday night? Nice.
Thursday.
But the oil stays sharp. The people stay sharp, you know? Really?
It's 13 hours difference. But as you go in zone 5, you know how many zones it changes? 3 hours behind, 6 hours behind, 8 hours behind. 13 hours ahead.
Chazal the Gemara. Tuma and Tara, very hard Gemara. You need extra time.
I'm trying to find a few hours. I just want to listen to all the shir on Rav Chanina Skanakona because I enjoyed the most so much when I learned it. It was such a shmaki Gemara in Spanish. Yeah, I just want to get a shir on this.
You should have it on one.
Yeah, they should make one CD or something. Just Rav Chanina Skanakona. Just Rav Chanina Skanakona.
Transportation to and from the airport. No, I mean in America.
The headlines on the yeshiva.net are so tantalizing. You need a shita that no liquids, that all liquids are tar. Such a tantalizing.
Trying to make it somewhat attractive.
It's such a tantalizing, a unique shita. Like, whoa, we want to just jump right in.
Okay. Page Yud Beis, in the middle of the second paragraph. We've been learning about two preparations that are necessary and vital in order to absorb a new awareness. It's called two hafshatas. Two hafshatas means two stages in the process of stripping oneself from the old to absorb the new. And he says to understand them, you always have to look at the absence, what's missing when you don't have them. So the first idea was that a person can really empty his mind or heart from previous thoughts, paradigms, ideas, and carve out an empty vessel, which is not empty in the sense that it's devoid of everything, but it's open. It's really open, not blocked, and no interference of the static of the previous noises. Now this exercise in and of itself is extremely potent, powerful, because it's the static which interferes so much to the new. And static doesn't here necessarily mean that it feels like static. Static is just that, instinctively, this is how I approach things. This is how I deal with things. And sometimes a person, by the way, can live their whole life without ever noticing it. It's just the way it is. Like we don't even think we have control over it. It just happens. Like what am I supposed to do? Not be me? But really it's not you. It's not me. It's just I learned that method to survive. And fortunate is the person who can identify these things. Because that's... The machine, yeah. We all try to survive. Yeah. And the animal in us wants to survive. The puppy wants to survive with a little elephant or the little rat or the little, whatever your nefesh Bahamas looks like. Sometimes it's a little elephant, a little rat, a little cheetah, a little lioness. Some of them are cute also. Some puppies are very cute. It's not necessarily always some of them are monsters. I wouldn't get in their way. You have to know with was behem handelt. Huh? Yeah. So some are chimpanzees, gorillas. Some are ants, little ants, also trying to survive, and very sophisticated. By the way, animals are pretty brilliant. I wouldn't call them sophisticated, but brilliant, genetically brilliant. So it just becomes, this is how I operate. This is my mechanism. And I don't even know that I have control. Of course, this is how I respond. But here we're teaching that no, a lot of this is really when you learn who you are, They're choices we make. And a person can also really open himself or herself up for newness. But there's one condition: I have to be a clay reika, an empty vessel. And an empty vessel means that I open myself up to a new flow of energy, a new flow of water. Now, this doesn't mean that a person becomes an empty vessel, like we say, apusta keli, which means there's nothing inside. That's in the negative sense. You know, you're apusta keli, just an empty person. Here, it's an emptiness, which means an openness to infinity. So it's a completely different type of reikon. There's reikon that you're just empty, you know. In Yiddish, it's a pusten vist. It's just empty, devoid of everything. Here, it's the emptiness in the most positive sense, that I don't allow any static on any level, physical, psychological, emotional, even spiritual or intellectual, to be able to obstruct that flow. So that's number one. But he said there's also number two. Number two is the language of Kabbalah, it's that he becomes an nekuda tachas hayisoid, which means, as he puts it here, that he becomes close. He brings himself very close to the mentor to hear the words. This is in the positive, not emptying yourself out, but after that is now the attentiveness. There's what not and there's what yes, right? There's going away from the old, but now there is tuning into the new. Whereas the expression of the Gemara, which I looked as a Maseches Chagigah in the beginning of Gimel, I say Aznecha kafre cheses, tune in, make your ear like a receptor, a receiver, to absorb. To understand it, he says, let's look at the absence. The absence of number one is that there may be a person who listens and listens to everything, and even listens to words or letters or paragraphs that he may not comprehend and understand. But he's not really ready to go away from the old. So everything that he or she comprehends will always be according to my ancient paradigms. And what we spoke yesterday, there's learning Torah like an older person and learning Torah as a child, and no difference about your age. It's just an entire approach of how clean the slate is, how really, really clean the slate is. That's number one. Now we come, and that when that's missing, it becomes very obvious. The person will grasp, the person will be enriched, the person will comprehend, but always in a very limited way, based on how much I'm ready, based on my old filing cabinets, and what fits in goes, whatever doesn't fit in, I don't even relate to, and even that which I do relate to is on my terms. There is something else now. We come now to stage two. We're holding the line Hakoidmim. It's mamash, the middle of the page, Yud Beis. The line is Hakoidmim, middle of the second paragraph of the page. V'yesh mi shemafshit es atzmei b'yoseh. On the other hand, you may have a student who is mafshit himself very much, which means he does strip himself from the old, what he calls the old yediyos, the old haskalos, the old paradigms. Umaniach, he puts away aside. Umesalik yediyos of Hakoidmim, and puts away his previous yediyas, his previous knowledge, so that he could really, really open himself up. Aval, but he doesn't have the second discipline. He may have humility in the sense that he's really very open. Like a child, many ways has it. A child, the reason they remember so much, people remember what happened. Sometimes you hear from your child something you said 3 years later. Like, how do you remember that? Because children actually remember. They remember, they don't even know how much they remember. Because it's really a very clean slate, right? Like the Mishnah says, Diyoy ksuva al niyar chadash. It's fresh paper. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, we spoke about yesterday. Elisha ben Avuya says, that's what a child is. The brain is so fertile, so ready to absorb. So a person may have that. Some people, there's a certain openness, but the attentiveness lacks. What's lacking now is the second step, and that is the effort to really be attentive, to become a conduit for everything that he won't do. He'll receive things that come in easy, what he understands. Things that come out of the mouth of his Rebbe, his master, and he doesn't have any understanding, he will not absorb them. In other words, he may have the ability to be completely open. I'm not interfering with my static, with my paradigms. I'm a receptacle. But the discipline, the attentiveness, the commitment, the positive dedication to really be completely attuned to every word, to every nuance, whether I understand it or I don't understand it. Because if it's only what I can understand, meaning that which goes in right now into this open vessel, it's also going to be limited. I may be learning very new things, but it's limited to that which doesn't require, again, a different type of Mesiras Nefesh, a different type of commitment, which is really, really challenging myself to things that don't come easy, things that are completely new, things that right now just fly right over my head, and from all practical purposes, it seems to me like a waste of time. It's boring, it's irrelevant, it's inconsequential, it's incomprehensible. This too will not allow a student to really transform himself. So both components, when they're lacking, each one has its own uniqueness. One is the ability to be able to go away to the old, you know, lech lecha me'artzecha me'meladetecha me'beis avicha, so to speak. You know, shichichi amech u'beis avich, as the expression in Tehillim. And then there is tuning in, really tuning in, asay aznacha kafre cheses, where my ears become truly receptacle of the new. And one without the other will be missing something very substantial.
The second sorrow of not being willing to listen and be collate things that he simply has no interest or understanding of could really come from two different dysfunctions. Either he doesn't have confidence in the Rabbi, that he's going to be able to really make it present something appealing and understandable, or he doesn't have confidence in himself that he'll be able to reach the level.
Right.
He doesn't speak about which one.
Right. Right.
Sounds like actually more than the Rebbe. Like, that's what I thought also. That it sounded to me more like was it Avram Shiatsu?
No, well, listen, if you're talking about a teacher who has proven himself to say nothing, then, you know, we're not talking about that. Like, this is all predicated on a foundation of deep trust. You know, we share that. Without that, then the whole process becomes a mockery and an exercise in futility and even masochism, self-torture. It happens. These things happen. In other words, the teacher is delusional, the student is delusional. The student would like to have such a teacher, the teacher would have liked to been, but it's like it's not an authentic thing. There has to be, you know, what to deliver. There's really something being delivered, both in terms of the subject and in terms of the person. And then the student can challenge himself, but you want to challenge yourself. If you empty your vessel for somebody to fill it with even worse trash, at some point you stop emptying your vessel. In other words, the emptiness, the openness must be rewarded with something that's worth it. Because if not, it becomes extremely discouraging and even worse. As I told you, when a mashpia doesn't have a makabel, it's painful. But when a makabel doesn't have a mashpia, it's more than painful. It's very painful.
I find another element here is not mentioned here.
Yes.
I find many times that difficult concepts require time
Of course.
to crystallize
Of
out in
course.
your mind. And many times you don't understand something
Right.
in the beginning.
That's exactly the point. But the point is not to shut down. You're right. Sometimes things take time. They always take time. A lot of time. Yeah, you have to hear it again and again and again, and then one day, one moment, boom, something, a little light shines in. That's true. But that's what attentiveness means. Attentiveness means I'm not running away. I stay here.
It sounds like you must grasp it right away.
No, tuning in. Eine mekabel. He's ready to be mekabel. He's ready to be open to it. He may not grasp it. V'hadvarim mevonim l'chol bal nisaya. This is understood by anybody with experience. Anybody who is a bal nisayan, meaning he has nisayan, he has experience, understands this. V'hahesber b'zeh aruch ma'od. And the explanation in both of the elements, number one and number two, is very lengthy. But this is the point, and whoever has experience with this understands both of these elements very well. Aval al kol ponim. But what's the summation of this whole long, lengthy explanation, which he's not getting into? The summation is this: ha'achanas halalu b'hamakabel. It's these preparations in the student which ma'orer es ha'tainug ha'pnimi shel ha'mashpia lashpia. This is what triggers most, what arouses most the tainug ha'pnimi, the innermost delight and pleasure in the mentor to give and to give everything. Remember, we're dealing here with a new insight that is completely from a different realm, that the mashpia went into in order to grasp, but the student remains bereft, remains forlorn. He could see on the face of the mentor at some point that there is a new glow, there is nehiru da'anpin, but he himself doesn't grasp it. Now comes the stage where the teacher wants to give it to him, but it needs a hachana, needs a preparation. These are the two preparations from the student, and both of them they arouse the deep, deep tainug, the pleasure, the delight in the mentor to give, to communicate, and to give everything. And this is the tainug hapnimi. Ki gam hu maniach u'mesalik es atzmo l'tzorech hamakabel. And now he goes through the same stages. Because in order to really communicate, he also has to go through these two stages. In addition to him being a student, being a real teacher, he goes through this. Number one, hu maniach u'mesalik es atzmo l'tzorech hamakabel. He suspends himself and puts himself aside for the sake of the recipient, for the sake of the student. That's number one. Similar to the preparation, number one of the makabel, hanachas atzmusai. The teacher also does hanachas atzmusai. Why? Because remember, there's still going to have to be a long tzimtzum, a big tzimtzum, to be able to get from the yud to the hey, to the vav and the hey, that we spoke before about the klal and the prat, the klal and the prat. In order for him to grasp it, now he has to go through a whole process in order to bring it down. And for this, he must really suspend himself for the sake of the student. And here right away we see, it's not a process that happens in the student alone. The same exact process must be reciprocated by the teacher. If he's not ready to suspend himself, so then something is off here. What's the greatest tainug? What triggers that deepest desire to give on that level? When the student completely puts aside everything and opens himself up to this, so the teacher can't refuse it. It's almost impossible to refuse, because watching that openness, that readiness, that empty vessel, it's impossible for the mashpia to refuse that. And now what he does exactly the same thing. He forgets himself. He renounces himself for the sake of the student, just like the student renounced himself for the sake of the truth that comes from the teacher. So that process triggers a similar process from the giver. It's like back to kamayim haponim laponim, kain lev ha'adam ala adam. The student renounced all of his old paradigms in order to receive the new. What that does is, in the mashpia, it brings forth a deep tainug, a tainug hapnimi, very deep delight and a very deep pleasure to do what? To do exactly the same thing. To renounce his own identity and his own focus on his own growth, to be able to tune into the world of the student. Va'acher kach. Now comes step two. There is going away from himself, renouncing his own, what we call his own steiging, so to speak. There's a beautiful word from the Ponim Yofis. The Ponim Yofis was a colleague of the Balatanya. His name was, he's known as the Baal Hafla. Hafla is Harav Pinchas Levi Ish Horowitz. He was one of the Gaonim of his generation. He was the Rav of Frankfurt in Germany. Av Bezdin. He was one of the Gaonim of the generation. He wrote a sefer called Hafla on Maseches Ksuvas and the Hamakna on Maseches Kedushin, which are still very yeshivish as farm. They're learned in all the yeshivas. He also wrote a sefer on Chumash called Ponim Yafis. He was a student of the Maggid of Mizrich. And so he has a sefer Ponim Yafis. He says, I think he writes it in the introduction, that the Gemara says in Maseches Chagiga, on the pasuk Malachi says, Torah yivakshu mipiyu ki malach Hashem tzvayisu. Im arav doima lemalach Hashem tzvayis yivakshu Torah mipiyu. V'im lav al yivakshu Torah mipiyu. If your teacher is like an angel, you should learn Torah from him. If he's not like an angel, you shouldn't learn Torah from him. So what does this mean? So everybody's looking for malachim, where are you going to find the malach? What does it mean? So the Panim Yafas gives a fascinating explanation. He says the difference between a malach and a neshama, it says a malach is called an oimed. He stands in one place. A neshama is called a mahalach. He's always moving. Pasuk says in Schariv, and asati lecha mahalchim beina oimdim ma'ela. I'm going to give you the ability to move between all those who stand. Because a malach, more or less, has his own orbit. You know, it's like the moon. The moon orbits. It's a complicated orbit, but it's predictable. It orbits. A malach, spiritually, it has its orbit. It's, spiritually, genetically coded to move this way. It grows, but the growth is always incremental and relative to yesterday. A neshama, a soul down here in this world, because of the uniqueness of our world, there is quantum leaps, transformation, the ability to really move away from the old. That's a soul, not an angel. So he says, Im harav doime, if the Rav is like a malach, then you should learn from him. Why? He says a lot of teachers, they want to teach, they want to express themselves. So if you already learned something and you know it well, you don't want to teach that again because you want to express, you want to feel engaged. So therefore they have to grow and grow and grow and grow, and they have to give a shiur that is unique and novel for the teacher, that he should feel accomplished. What's the problem? The problem is that the student is not holding there. So therefore, he's not really teaching him. He's teaching himself. At the end, he feels good that he presented such a great idea, but it doesn't go into anybody. It's not suitable to the keli of the student. He says, make sure your Rav is like a malach. He's an oimed. He renounces the need to be a mahalach in order to be an oimed. Sometimes you can have in a yeshiva, you can have a Rosh Yeshiva, and he has brilliant ideas, and he needs a platform. So it happens to be a room full of students, so they become the karbonos for his brilliance. Now, it may be taka brilliant, but a teacher, he's not. He's not a teacher. Why? Because they completely don't need that. Not shaykh to them. They're going to go away with nothing. They're not ready for it. So rather, you have to be an oimed. An oimed, that's the idea. He puts himself aside completely for the sake of the makabel. But then there's step 2. That's only going away from the old. Now there's going stage 2. The stage 2 in the student becomes stage 2 in the teacher. He gets close to the student. And he must measure him. He must estimate him. Bichlal ubefrat. If you remember the letter Vav and the letter Hey, right? Bichlal, he has to measure him generally and measure him specifically in a differentiated way. Lefi erech hashpa sheroitz legalos, vis-a-vis the idea that he wants to share. You have to know your student bichlal and you have to know befrat. Just like with yourself, you always have to have the big picture, and then you have to be able to differentiate. Azra vayisapra. We learned before from Iev, Chachma, Bina, Ra, Vayisapra. There's the big picture and there is the details. If you don't have the big picture, if you don't know really what you want to convey, you're missing something. But if you only have the big picture, you don't have the pratim, the structure, it's also not going to work. Sometimes people prepare, they have the big picture, they see the forest, but they don't have the pratim, right? So therefore, ultimately, it can't really be communicated effectively. On the other hand, sometimes people have all the details, but there's no big picture. There's no forest. There's only one tree, another tree, another tree. But the same thing has to happen vis-a-vis the student. I have to understand bichlal and befrat. I have to measure him from a place of klal and also measure him from a place of prat.
How can the teacher empty himself out and still know all that stuff? All the details of where he wants to go. You have to know from the previous experience.
It's not mamish like the recipient in that sense, but it is because he really has to completely suspend his way of thinking about it and tune in to how he could communicate it to the student. From experience and really from tuning into the student's world.
Right, now his point is he's not forgetting now the token of
Well,
Getting
yeah.
how he should relate to he's putting aside all his previous preconceived notions of how he can communicate to
He has to put aside all his preconceived notions of how he could communicate, and also put aside the natural urge of continuing to relate to the idea from his perspective.
teaching at him rather than teaching to him.
Huh?
Teaching at him
Yeah.
rather than teaching to him.
Yeah. Umemela, and like always, these are mashalim, but they relate to so many different situations. You want to communicate to your child, you want to communicate to your spouse, you want to communicate even to an employee or a friend, right? So sometimes we're tempted just to say what's on our minds. The person may be completely not ready to hear these words. They may not understand them, they may misconstrue them, they may misinterpret them. So it requires a very big tzimtzum to be able to tune in to who you are, where you are, and how I can touch you today, rather than just express myself and say, oh, I expressed myself. I expressed myself to myself, not to anybody else.
The hold back and you break it down.
Huh?
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. וממילא נעשה לה מקבל תענוג יוסר נפלא וניילה מכפי שמקבל בהשפעה הקדמס אפילו קודם הסתלקוס המויכן כי המויכן דכעסם יוסר ניילם ורמים באופן אצל המשפיע בעצמי או דבר חדש. And when the student finally receives this, there's now a whole new tainug, a whole new delight, wondrous and far greater than what he received earlier, even in the beginning. Before anything happened, there was no drama, there was no departure, there was no ascent, there was no istalkus hamoichin. But now what he's receiving is something so powerful, so new that even for the mentor, it's a complete revolution. So for sure for the student. So this process allows him to really experience a tainug and a relationship on a completely different level, which he could have not anticipated before, and he could have never experienced if this whole entire process would have not happened. He would have remained in the previous level of awareness, which was nice and lovely, perhaps, and there was a lot of tainug. But it's only this istalkos hamoichin, which comes as a result of new moichin being developed, which results in the absence, which results in the Talmud feeling that very powerful moment of loss, which results in the fact that the teacher, which comes from the fact that the teacher had to ascend in order to experience the new, as explained at length on all three levels, which continues in a sense of solace and comfort that something good is happening, a new idea emerged, a new idea is fermenting and becoming ripe, which inspires and creates a yearning in the student for the new on both levels of hafshata that we explained, which triggers the tainug in the mashpia, which ultimately allows a whole new level of communication, and that relationship doesn't only go back to where it was, but now there is ultimately a new revelation that was unprecedented in the entire communication beforehand. V'hinei al pi mashal hanal yuvun shuvas hakadosh baruch hu l'Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom shesha aloi l'datoi shel midas hadin v'al pi ze chakar lahavin shoyresh hadin v'shuras hadin kanal barichas b'shtei hashailas. From here we come back all the way to our discussion what happened between Moshe and Hashem by the first exile of the Jewish people. Moshe, who understands that everything works with Midas Hadin. That's how the system works, Midas Hadin. Midas Hadin means quid per quo, you do, and there are consequences. And he learned it from Sefer Bereshis. Bereshis operates Midas Hadin, Bereshis bara Elokim. What did you do to deserve this? What did you do to trigger this consequence? How bad have you been? Who did you murder? Who did you destroy? When did you become corrupt? When did you kill your grandmother? Let's find out so we could see the reason for the consequence. Shmois doesn't have that. The Jews are in exile with there's no context, no sins. That was the struggle that we spoke about. And he wanted to understand Shayrish Adin and Shuras Adin. Shayrish Adin means what? The root for the din. Why? Shuras Adin means the system. System is the longer you are serving your punishment, the easier it becomes. At the end, it's easy. At the end, you're in a halfway house. That should have been the system in Galus also. It's already at the end. It should become the easiest. Not the exact opposite happens. Something is off. Something is strange. On his first question, and then he continues the other question that when I came to Pari, it became worse, not better. Redemption starts, it becomes worse. So he says, Ata tira. Now, Ata dafka. Me'acha she'ka'es nepach legamri. Ha'chayis ha'leki ba'ofen shedvar ha'vaya she'basorim ha'moris einam ma'irim klal lamata. Since now, the godly energy in the world has been transformed to the point that the divine energy known as the 10 utterances which sustain creation are completely not manifest and revealed to the point to the point that Parai and his henchmen can completely deny the reality of godliness. For the first time, Parai says, Al Yishu b'divrei sheker. All Moshe is doing is uttering lies. What was Moshe saying? There's a God who wants us redeemed. That ability to be able to deny a lakus completely, on one level, it's the worst moment of Galus. It's the worst.
No, this is the moment the Shir got disconnected.
Exactly. This is the moment the Rebbe is gone. You look, where is he? Where's he's gone. He's not here. Come back. I'm not here. I don't know you. I don't care about you. There's complete detachment from an external perception. This is the moment that the Shir got completely interrupted. There's not even an external communication. There's not even a gesture. The relationship seems completely dead. And there's no interest anymore. There's no passion. There's no presence. It's like, where is God? Look, search. And Parai emerges. And Parai now says, Al Yishu b'divrei sheker. It's lies. As he said, the old Parai told Yosef, we'll see that later. But here there's a complete denial of godliness. So on one level, Moshe is so disturbed. You send me for redemption only to make a mockery. You don't want to redeem, don't redeem. You say, now we're going, I've heard the pain, go. I go, and what happens? Gets worse. And the Jews are looking at me and saying, what are you doing? At least we survived as slaves, tortured but survived. And what you're doing is just causing the complete murder and annihilation. So Moshe comes to Hashem and says, May us basi el pare ledaber b'shmecha. Heira lo mazeh v'hatzel lo yitzalta samecha. It gets worse. Pare said that the Jews are dreaming of redemption because they're not working hard enough. They're too lazy. Nirpim atem nirpim. You're lazy, good for nothings. They're only working 18 hours a day in the field. That's too little. When you're lazy, you find God as an excuse. He says, increase the burden of labor on them. Now they have to collect the straw on their own and yet do the same quota, prepare and complete the same quota of bricks every day. And they're beaten and they're hit. And he says, and if they work hard enough, they won't al yishu, they won't turn to falsehoods, to false hopes. Right? Religion is the opium of the Egyptian Jews. They have all this, they're leaning on straw.
Why should the Jews be punished because Paro and the Mitzrayim denied Hashem?
No, the Jews are not being punished. That's his point. Moshe looks at this moment and he says, you started the process of redemption and it went backwards. It went backwards. What are you doing? One question is, B'chalal, why there's Galus and the whole system of Galus. Another question is, and why when you're already finishing the Galus, it gets worse. So he says, this is the moment. This is the moment. Listen to these words. Shekvar nizgalu hamoichin hachadoshim da aseres adibris. The asarim mamoros is shir number 1. Aseres hadibris, that's the real shir. The asarim mamoros is good stuff. Asarim mamoros is all science, all physics, all cosmology, all astronomy, all geology. And that's just the first few steps. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. All biology. All everything in this world. Basara Mamaris Nivra Olam. And after 5,500 years, we still have not scratched the surface of what is contained in a single cell. What is contained in a single atom. In one atom. I'm not talking about one atom. What is contained? That's all Asara Mamoris. Asara Mamoris Nivra Olam. That's a shear. The world is a shear, and it's a pretty deep shear. If you'll ask me, it's a pretty deep shear. Vaharaya, 6,000 years later, humans have researched, so we know a lot of stuff, and we built bridges, and we built airplanes, and we built internet, and we built computers, and we landed on the moon 50 years ago, and we split the atom, right? But it's not Aseres Hadibris. There's Asarim Mamoris, Aseres Hadibris. Asarim Mamoris are the 10 sayings that created the world. Aseres Hadibris is what happens at Sinai, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. So Asarim Mamoris is the first shir. So he says the moment Asarim Mamoris are concealed completely. What's Asarim Mamoris? Asarim Mamoris is the presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom in the world. That there is an author, there's somebody who's speaking it into existence. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Kol ha'omer davar b'shem oimrai, mevi geula la'olam. When you say something in the name of the one who said it, you bring redemption to the world. Right? Shenemar v'atomer estel l'melech b'shem Mordechai. What is the meaning of this? So if I quote somebody, I bring redemption to the world, and if I don't quote you, I plagiarize. That's it, no geula la'olam. What's the meaning of this? So there's different interpretations. One interpretation is, I heard this from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Kala oimer davar b'shem oimrai. A person who says everything b'shem oimrai. You identify the one who's saying it into existence. Hu amar vayehi b'dvar Hashem shemayim nasu. You're oimer davar, you look at everything and you trace it back. What's the difference of plagiarism and not? Plagiarism means I steal your material and it becomes mine suddenly, yeah? And I print a book with my name and it's half is stolen from you. What's Oimer Davar B'Shem Oimrei? I trace it back to the one who said it. Everything in the world, every davar, there's an Oimrei, there's somebody who's saying it, who's bringing it into existence. When you identify and everything you say in the name of the one who brings it into existence, Mevi Geula La'olam. You redeem the world. Olam comes from the word helam. You emancipate the world from a state of concealment. So you take a cup of coffee, a cup of water, and say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shehakoil niya bidvaroi. Everything came into existence through His word. That's a oimer davar b'shem oimra. And what happens? The whole world is redeemed. This is the process of Asarim Mamoris. Suddenly, there's a state where Asarim Mamoris are completely concealed. The shir is stopped. There's no communication. There's no revelation. The student is holding on to something. And Paroi says, there's nothing. I don't know God. Lo yadati es Hashem. I'm not interested. And it becomes even worse. He calls it a lie. So he says, what's pshat? Zelecha ha'ois shekvar nizgalu ha'moichin ha'chadoshim da'aseres hadibris. This means the new level of awareness. The higher shear already emerged in the world. Shehu moichin da'atike k'moishe yizbayir. This is what we called moichin da'atik. Remember, when does the first shear go dead? When there's when the new light was born. Before the new light was born, everything looks beautiful. A new light was born, a higher level of moichin, and what happens? There's histalkus, he goes up. V'zelecha ois, right. Right. Yeah.
The word
Right. Zelachais ki anoichi, yeah. Yeah, beautiful diuk. This is the eyes. Now, this doesn't mean that it's not painful. Don't confuse the two. This doesn't mean it's not painful. It's painful. Because there's a loss. There's a real loss here. But it means it's painful, but it's not hopeless. It's not because you're living in a world where you're just thrown to the dumps, where you're left hanging dry. It may feel that way. This is where trust comes in, right? You have to know who your teacher is. If you can really suspect that one day he's in a bad mood, that's what he felt like. In Midas Hadin, he's right. In Judaism, as Midas Hadin, I did right, I get reward. I did bad, I get punishment. It's a very black and white system. And we know that there are still a lot of, many of our holy brothers and sisters who only know about that system of Judaism. It's very black and white. Something happened, what did you do bad, If things are going good, oh my God, what's going to happen next week? It's a very clear system. Midas Hadin. You do good, bad, and it's very clear. Somebody is suffering, let's find out what he sinned. Why is sin? Huh? You fashbish b'maisav, yeah. The Rambam and Hilchas Tainius, not to say mikra nikra, yeah. Machloikus in Gemara, if yesh yisurim b'loy, like the Gemara in Baba Bas, and yisurim b'loy avon. In brachas, there's a whole argument. Is there something called yisurim shel ava? Is it always preceded by sin? It's a huge argument, and ultimately, it's not resolved. Of course, it's not resolved. But when you look at the Sefer Eov, right, you see a whole other dimension over there. Eov says, I'm innocent. His friends say it's impossible, you're a criminal. And they're arguing for chapters. He says, I'm innocent, I'll take God to court. At the end, you would think God will side with the friends. They were the ones who said, you're the bad guy, Hashem is good, just confess your sins. And Eov said, I did nothing wrong. At the end, Hashem says, his friends need atonement. It's a very sensitive issue. So what is the Rebbeinu Shalom telling Moshe Rabbeinu here? The Asarim Amoros are concealed. There's no trace of them in the world. This shear is interrupted. Good things are happening. That means the Aseres Hadibris were born. The new identity, the new reality of Aseres Hadibris emerged. And because they emerged, that's what caused the histalkus of the old moichin, the departure, the ascent, the interruption, which for the student, the lifeline just got cut. Which in reality translates into the intensity of Golus Mitzrayim.
So then Tisha B'Av is necessary. Tisha B'Av is necessary.
That's the point.
A new Amkus in the Gemara of, isn't there something about Ein Sadik Yotzim and Olam until new Neshama comes in
Yeah.
to replace him?
Yeah. V'zarech Hashemesh abah Hashemesh. The sun sets for a new sun to emerge. Dar hoilech v'dar ba. And that's the paradox of Tisha B'Av. That's what I explained that we spoke about Friday. That when you look at Tisha B'Av, you see this paradox in Judaism that is a very, very strange paradox. It's the worst of times and it's the best of times. So it's very hard to put your hand around it. So people give all types of explanations. You'll hear all these types of shiurim, and they're like, once God is finished punishing, good things will happen. Whatever, all these types of explanation doesn't hit the core. It's not the nekuda, because it's too paradoxical. The destruction happens, Mashiach is born. Why should Mashiach should be born the next day?
This is about our great national tragedy, Tisha B'Av. In the great personal tragedies that befall a person, are we to understand that this message is true in everyone's personal tragedy? After they deal with the chitzonis, we deal with chitzonis of Tisha B'Av before we think about the pneumius of Tisha B'Av. So after someone deals with the avelis and the pain that they're supposed to potentially emerge an awareness that in this, Bo Hashemesh, there's also Zarach Hashemesh, that there are new mochim that have somehow. But is this a lesson applicable to one's daily life?
Reb Shlomo says absolutely. Reb Shlomo says absolutely.
I always go for Shlomo.
And b'cha halachic Reb Shlomo in this sugya.
I don't understand. So it's like a seed is planted.
Listen, it's very sensitive.
Yes, you can't tell.
It's not something that you just preach lightheadedly. Oh, it's great stuff, man. It's like looking at this student, right? The shiur is obviously a model. It's a metaphor. Most of us don't take shiurim so seriously that. So he stopped talking. Great. So recess is earlier. In most cases, the Rebbe spaced out. Wonderful. Let's light the fire bombs and go for lunch. Let's go to the gym, right? It would actually be a very exciting moment if the teacher gets lost in his new ideas. I just want to bring that out. Present company, of course, excluded. But it's a very serious mashal because we're talking about a relationship that is very, very deep.
Yeah, but doesn't the mashal fall short in the case of, with all due respect?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, of course. You're right. You're right.
So how is it that we make an analogy here?
Well, that's what a mashal is.
It seems, no, but I'm saying it seems to be misplaced. Because the Talmidim in Mitzrayim were not the Kalim in the Kabbal. They were just the exact opposite. They were so toxic that their belief system in their Rebbe, in Moshe, or in God, it seems to me was truncated to the point where you have it on one side from the perspective of the apple of the teacher, but not on the other side from the Makabel. So how is that fair? That's not a fair analogy, right?
But you're because the truth is, it seemed that way also. But Moshe said, "V'hein lo ya'aminu li." They're not going to believe me. They're not interested. And he became a leper because of it. He became a Mitzorah. And the Gemara says, Hashem said in Shabbos Tzavdik Zayin, Ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. You don't know them. You have to trust them. And you're speaking gossip about them, obviously relative to the level of Moshe. Because Moshe was looking at tremendous toxicity, and they were in a very difficult place. And also, in Parshas Vaschanan, the term that he uses for Egypt is Kur HaBarzel. You know what Kur HaBarzel is? Kur HaBarzel is the iron furnace, there's the word for it. The crucible. The crucible, very good. Where you refine the barzel. It's very hot. Which means that the Jewish, there's a beautiful Torah from Reb Shimshon Astropoler on this. It's a Moededik Torah. Say good. Say good. And imagine if I would have to invent that Torah, I would really have to go. I'm just trying to remember what I read. But if I would have to invent that Torah, I would have to take a go. I have to recall the details. The point is that sometimes we become ready for different things in life through two ways. One consciously, like the student you're talking about, and sometimes there's even a deeper way, and that is experiences of life, life's experiences. And that sometimes prepares people in a much deeper way, you know? Right, but I think we have all seen people, and maybe ourselves even, that certain life's experience just bring you to a place where you become an open vessel.
There's no question that if a clay vase that you can create something anew. But my question really is, the experience in Mitzrayim, that's what we're talking about.
The experience in Mitzrayim.
There was something unique in the Jewish people that was open to an experience
Yeah.
that was connected to their experience.
Yeah.
But I just, for the record, I'm just making a point here that it seems that the analogy
Granted.
is not consistent with what we've been learning.
granted. And thank you for sharing that.
I'm just a conduit. I didn't put my experience, for the record also, I didn't put my experience aside when I said that. I've been listening to try to square the reality of
Right.
Russia with the
Right.
They were really emptied out at this time. They were really, really emptied out in a way. Not so much by choice.
Yeah. I mean, he calls it a crucible. In a crucible, the iron is just, it loses its whole.
No, but there's a lack of cognition, is my
Right. I understood you. You know, sometimes you meet people, and they live. I don't mean to talk about addiction again, but it's not addiction, it'll be marriage, but we'll stick to addiction for now. You have a person, they're wrapped in so many lies. I think Winston Churchill once said about the Soviet Union, it's an enigma wrapped in a riddle, right, encompassed by a puzzle that is all a lie or something. It was a great definition of the Soviet Union. You know, lie after lie after lie after lie, which is also a lie. The lies are also lies. It's so far from truth, right? Everything there was a lie. There was like not one statement that was ever true. Stalin is sick, Stalin died. I mean, the whole thing from beginning, because the whole thing was a lie. It thrived on lies, which is why it destroyed itself at some point. So you have people like that. You have people, you know, who are just that way. The lies are so deep, it's not even conscious anymore. That's really what happens with addiction. The lie, everything is a lie, and more lies. You lie to yourself, to your wife. You just lie to everybody. And the pain of that is just, it's unbearable, which is why you have to lie so much. And there's no way of talking to the person. There's no way of communicating to the person because they're just lying. They can't even look at you. There's nobody here. There's nobody present. You know, that's the difference between somebody who's present and you can have a conversation and somebody who's not present. And sometimes the only tikkun is, and it's very painful, when they lose everything. They mamish lose everything. Now sometimes they destroy everything and there's nothing left to lose because they're dead. But sometimes they lose everything. I once, a fellow once came to see me, and he shared with me the following. He grew up in Lakewood, very nice family, a good family, 11 children. All of them are learning, and you know they're supported by a rich grandfather or something. And he's married himself with a bunch of kids, and he was in kollel for many, many years. And he fell prey to addiction, gambling primarily. And this went on for a long time, and he was hiding it and lost a lot of money and lost the money that was given to him. He said, "What brings you here?" And he said that he was living a complete life of addiction and lies to everybody. And he said a few months ago, he came to see me, it was spring or beginning of summer. He said a few months ago, he was sitting in Atlantic City in the casino, gambling away the last pennies he had, drunk. And there's no clocks in the casinos, you know that? Because they don't want you to know time. They just want you to be there forever. And he said somebody walked over to him and said, "You know what time it is?" He said, "No." The guy said, "It's 6 o'clock." And he said, "You know what day it is?" He says, "No." He says, "It's Yom Kippur." And he said, "I stopped." I said, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, that's Ne'ilah. Yom Kippur, 6 o'clock is Ne'ilah. And I'm here in Atlantic City. I said, wow, I reached a place in life that Yom Kippur by Ne'ilah, I'm gambling and drinking. I realized that I hit rock bottom. So he came for help, right? So what happens? What happens here is, in a very painful and paradoxical way, that kur habarzel, you know, that ability to look at your face and see the devil, woke him up to a whole new level of awareness. But it only came because he had to be shocked, mamash, a shock treatment, out of the old. So it happens on so many different levels that the Kur HaBarzel, the crucible, where the person is carved out, becomes empty, not necessarily because of his work, but because of, in many ways, it may be the most beneficial moment in life, when he has to face the truth and suddenly say goodbye to everything and come clean and confess everything. And that's very, very hard. And the ability to be like a child and say, I know nothing, everything was a lie, everything was a fabrication, everything was made up. To be able to say goodbye to all of that, it challenges him to become a clay reikon. And what looked like the worst moment often turns out to become the beginning of his redemption. So it's true on so many different stages, on so many different levels. So the doctor said, is it true on a personal level? It's all true on a personal level. That's the whole point of this mimer. It's not just the national. What's true in the macro is true in the micro. But it's a very sensitive process. And one has to be very careful how it's presented, not only to others, even to yourself, because this does not take away the pain of the experience of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is painful, and a personal Tisha B'Av is very painful. Nobody says, oh, Tisha B'Av, a new light came into the world, let's eat, let's dance. Why are we sitting on the floor saying Eicha? Why are we saying Kinnis? Why are we fasting? What are you doing? The light of Mashiach was born, that's what it says. But everybody knows that that's trespassing the boundaries of halacha. There was a Jew who ate on Tisha B'Av publicly. It was the same Jew who changed the nusach of the brachas. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, matir isurim. Matir isurim. You know who this was? Shabsai Tzvi. He was born on Tisha B'Av, by the way, which was part of the problem. Because he was born on Tisha B'Av, right? Where did he go wrong? We're learning. There's so many. Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. Where you go wrong is, right, when somebody chas v'shalom comes to a shiva house and sits down and looks at the father, looks at the mother, oh, great light was just born. Like, great. You're off. What are you off? And you have sources. We just learned the Hester, the New Oyer, and everything. You're not in touch with the human experience. You're completely detached from the human experience. This student, his lifeline was just cut. He's choking. He said, oh, it's great stuff. I'm choking. I can't breathe. It's great stuff. But there was just the line was cut. So you have to be very sensitive to that and very attuned to that. And that's part of the experience. It's part of the realness of it. And yet we say together with that, Tisha B'Av is a day of Churban. We say within that itself there's something happening. But there's stages of how it develops. So it's very true on a personal level as well. But one has to always have compassion on yourself and on others to the process and the pain of the experience.
And that's the problem. The stages of redemption don't happen when the person gets stuck.
Of course. Of course. Of course. And it's never about judgment or trying to convince or pressure somebody. It's a very organic process. It's about empowerment. It's about really helping yourself and your loved ones always understand that when one door closes, it's because another one opened. And one window was shut because a different window opened. It's not that all the doors were closed. A different door opened. And I may not be interested in that door. I want this door. I want this door. I like this door. I like this exit. I like the end. I'm used to it. I like it. It's good for me. This is the place I want to walk. And I never asked for new doors. I don't need new relationships. I don't need new awareness. I don't need a new depth. I don't need a new God. I like my old God. My old comfort zone God. So that's a very understandable process. But now one has to make a choice. and the choice is really one of victimhood and deep despondency, and just look at life and say, I have been dealt a what? A bad deal. Bad hand, as they say. A sour face. Or it's time to be able to open myself up to a completely different reality. And on that note, I wish you all a very meaningful, empowering, wholesome, and authentic day. And Mazel Tov Reb Avram. Chasana today. Chasana today. As I said earlier, when I was a bacher, there was a legend in yeshiva that there was a certain boy who came to yeshiva on the day of his wedding, and in the afternoon he asked the principal permission if he could leave. The principal said, "Where are you going?" Seder. He said, "I have to get married." So he gave him permission, and that's when the bacher left yeshiva to go get dressed and to go to the chuppah. So that's the boy, and there was always a legend in yeshiva. I never knew if it's true or not, but then we had a shiur in the morning, and there was somebody getting married, Yehuda Nadolf, and he showed up 5:30 in the morning to learn Chassidus and learn Gemara. But he didn't have to pay the bills of his own wedding. A chassan, you just got to show up. You got to show up. But now you have the father coming. That's already a big chiddush. Chassan got to show up. Even though chassanim are stressed, right? But it's not like the parents. So welcome, Shabbat. Binyan Adeyad. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Yeah.
A phenomenon when they got before Kriyas Yamsuf, let's go back to work. They had a comfort level working with Sam, but the same token it was by Yitzhaki, by Yohanchi. So I don't know, it might not be cognitive, but there was a deep.
Vayeanchu, Vayetzaku.
It came from.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is
a comfort zone. They kept saying, "Leave me alone. Let me go back to the comfort zone." Somewhere
the truth is, it wasn't such a comfort zone.
No, but if you look at I remember the word from the Rabbi that said there were 4 groups of people.
Yeah. Nachzal Mitzrayim. There's a word from the Chidush Harim, you know what he said. On the Chidush Harim, or maybe the Sfas Emes. Yeah, chveis. V'hoitzeisi eschem mitachas sivlois Mitzrayim. What's sivlois? The world teaches, I'll take you out from the sevel, from the suffering. The word sivlois is like we have today a word savlanut. Lizbol. What's savlanut? Patience, tolerance. I'm going to take you out from a state in which you tolerate Mitzrayim. The beginning of Geula is when you become intolerant of Mitzrayim. As long as you make peace with abuse, you become like you have a battered woman syndrome. You're not going anywhere. The moment you say, this is sick, this is dysfunction, this is a lie, I'm not living like this another day, now you could be redeemed. So in a way, the Golus has to be real Golus for there to be real Geula. If Golus is chatzi nice, there's no Geula. You make peace with it. That's what happens. What do you need more? What do you need more? Mitachas sivlis. When you become intolerant, you say, this is sick. This is sick. I hate this. I'm not gonna tolerate this another day. Now you could be redeemed. Now you could be liberated. You vomit. You have to vomit. You have to spit out the Golus. Yeah. They're disgusted by it. If you're not disgusted by something, you'll stick with it. You'll make peace. It's always that way.
I met a fine African-American gentleman who tells me, I got 17 years clean. I said, wow, that's an accomplishment. How did you do it? He said, I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired, right?
We don't want to though, wait for hardship so that we can have a revelation.
No.
We want to be going good.
Yeah. That's how we will want the Geula. We don't need any more. Yeah, Jews already had enough. The Shia stopped. God's Shia was interrupted enough. We're ready for the real Shia.
Some of the guys this year some of us have hit very low places and had an aliyah from that. But we don't. But now we're doing good, and we want more aliyah from a good place.
That's true. That's true. Aliyah from a good place is what we want. Yeah. But sometimes it's hard because you become complacent.
Yeah, but that's what we're learning.
You're right. That's the tachlis.
Ula didn't come because we're not ready to go away from the old.
It's very difficult.
We're so entrenched in this life.
I can tell you.
If you don't know what Gullus is, how could you know what Gula is? If you don't know what Gula is, how can you know what Gullus is?
We're so comfortable in sometimes.
Yeah, it's true. Can I trouble you for the Gemara and the...
I would tell you something off the record, but I don't know.
Nothing in it.
There's no blue Gemara there? Oh, somebody took it out, Mr.
Confronting the dogmas.
There's no blue Gemara inside there? Is there Psachim there? Is that Psachim? Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the Gemara. Is there another Psachim? That's mine, okay. If it's applicable to today's teachers, if you'll be such a teacher, it'll be applicable to today's teachers. I think some of it is applicable to every teacher and every student. You know, what level is always degrees, but
Almost
every relationship it's applicable to.
Right, but your typical Rav and Talmud of today is not the
I know that.
But I'm asking.
It's hard. You need a Talmud who really trusts the Rav and a Rav who's completely committed to the Talmud. It's a very rich relationship. Talmud Muvhak. You know, he has skin in the game. Allein Gezeit nicht gesehen. Since the Shiurim 5:30 in the morning, Kaidem Atzimtzum. Where did you appear from? Where do you live? Oh, wow, okay. Used to come to my shia 15 years ago. You're with us every morning? Wow. The Chassidus? You watch the Chassidus? Reb Hillel's Amayma. It was printed the last few years. It was in the library. The Rebbe once said over the Maimer, Bekitzer, in a Sikha, and then they printed it a few years ago. It's an incredible Maimer, huh? Okay, Chavra. We're up to Tez Zayin Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom. Utlushin mi machshirin. Okay, Tez Zayin Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom. Utlushin mi machshirin. So in the previous shir, in the previous Gemara on Tazayin Amud Aleph, we explored the argument between Rav and Shmuel in understanding the famous testimony of Yosef ben Yoezer Ish Tzreida, who said that the liquid that flowed in the butchering home, in the butchering section of the Beis HaMikdash were pure. Rav said, mamish pure, no tumah whatsoever, mamish pure. Which means, as the Gemara says, that he holds that the whole tumah of liquid is only rabbinic. and therefore the rabbis can be selective and say, here yes, here not, and in the Beis HaMikdash we're canceling the entire concept, and therefore the liquids in the Beis HaMikdash, in the butchering section, the Beis HaMitbachayim, are not going to be tamei. Wow, that's like a big chiddush. So that means even if tumah touches the blood and touches the water, it does not become tamei, which of course saved so many karbanas from tumah.